Okay, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. Right now, I have it in, I guess you call it speaker mode for myself. So I'm big on my screen. That's because I want to show you this. If I put it right in front of me, because I have a false background here, if I hold it up over here, it'll disappear. But if I keep it right in front of me, this is my new book. Yesterday, I was very surprised and delighted to find a large box on my porch when I came home from my morning walk. And here was the author's copies of The Grand Delusion. Nice thick book. It looks pretty good to me anyway. I was very happy to see it. Anyway, but I just thought I'd let you know that this book is now available. Excuse me. I think it will be available in a few days. The shipment, Dharma Field has ordered, quite a few, and that should be coming soon. Usually, my experience has been within a few days of getting the advanced copies to the author, and they also become available online, which is way ahead of the publication date, which they said at October 13th. So I'm quite surprised, but because of that long leg, it's possible it might take a little longer. But I would encourage you now, if you're at all interested in picking up this book, you can go to Dharma Field's website, and you can order it there. You can also order it through the book's website, which is now up and running as well. And you can find that at, here's the web address, it's MTS. And MTS is abbreviation for mountains, right? At least I think it is. And with the letter R. So mountains are mountains, MTSRMTS.com. And if you go there, you can also not only find the book, or you can order the book. And that would be through Dharma Field if you do order it from that website. But also there's a number of other things that are related to the book, different talks I've given and other sorts of things that are on that website. So if that interests you at all, please help yourself to that. So, today's talk then. Well, this morning then, what I'd like to talk about is, I had something in mind, which I may or may not get to, but I realized what I was going to talk about had a term in it that didn't quite fit with right speech. So I was going to, I thought just this morning, I thought, I'm just going to review what the Buddha said about right speech. And when I did that, it just struck me that here we are in this political season, but a lot of political speech. And I just thought, it might be good for all of us just to review what the Buddha said about right speech. And I think just the tone of it speaks volumes, given the kind of rhetoric and, the words that we are hearing these days in abundance. So let's just take a look at this. And when I read that, I thought, there might be enough just to talk about this rather than to go on to the particular talk I thought I was going to give today. But who knows? I don't know how this is going to develop, but let's just see. So this is what the Buddha said in part about right speech. He said, they speak the truth, are devoted to the truth, reliable, worthy of confidence. They never knowingly deceive others for the sake of their own advantage. What they have heard here, they do not repeat there, so as to cause dissension there. Thus they unite those that are divided, and those that are united they encourage. Concord gladdens them. They delight and rejoice in concord, and it is concord that they spread by their words. They avoid harsh language and speak such words as are gentle, soothing to the ear, loving, going to the heart, courteous and dear, and agreeable to many. They avoid vain talk and speak at the right time, in accordance with facts. Speak what is useful. Speak about right wisdom and right practice. Their speech is like a treasure, at the right moment, accompanied by arguments, moderate and full of sense. This is what the Buddha said about right speech. And in just reviewing this morning, I guess maybe I already said, but it just really struck me after these last 2 weeks, especially 2 political conventions, and with all the words that are being thrown about, how this really seemed to contrast with so much of the speech we hear today. And so it just occurred to me that it wouldn't hurt just to review this at this time. But he says they speak the truth, are devoted to the truth, those who are using right speech. And they speak the truth, are devoted to the truth, reliable, worthy of confidence. If we speak the truth, if we truly can speak the truth without our own bias, without our own prejudice, without our own leaning of mind coming in to weigh on what it is that we might be saying, or how it is that we might be using our words to convince others or to persuade others, to do our bidding, to do what we think is right or what they should be doing. We're exerting some kind of intentionally we're exerting some kind of pressure on others, perhaps. It's controlling in some way. This isn't right speech, as the Buddha points out. They never knowingly deceive others for the sake of their own advantage. It's cut from here, but he goes on to say, or for others, the advantage of others, or for anyone's advantage whatsoever, he goes on to say, which is recorded here. But what they have heard here, they do not repeat there, so as to cause dissension there. Thus they unite those that are divided, and those that are united they encourage. So they aim for bringing about unity, not to divide us, not to set one side against another, and particularly with false speech or with lying and deceit, and trying to even openly make things run a particular way toward, for my advantage and that sort of thing. They unite those that are divided. They don't continue to divide them further and make the divisions ever more stark and intense. And those that are united, they encourage this. And why? Well, it goes on, he says, concord gladdens them. And we can come together in a harmonious way. Concord gladdens them. They delight and rejoice in concord. And it is concord that they spread by their words. So they speak in a way that brings people together in a harmonious way. And also perhaps turns our attention to truth, to reality that surrounds us all, and that is indifferent to any one of us, but embraces all of us. And so it is concord that they spread with their words, and in doing this, they avoid harsh language. Let's see, where am I here? Okay, I have to take my glasses off. They avoid harsh language and speak words as are gentle, soothing to the ear, loving, going to the heart, courteous and dear, and agreeable to many. They avoid vain talk, speaking of, myself or my way or our, uh, uh, our partisan view. Um, they avoid vain talk. They're just constantly concerned with our side and what it is that we want and want to accomplish. They speak what is useful in terms of bringing about concord is helpful. Well, I'm going to say more about this in just a minute. But they speak what is useful and speak about right wisdom and right practice. Their speech is like a treasure at the right moment, accompanied by arguments moderate and full of sense. So here in saying that concord gladdens them, they speak in a way to bring about more harmonious and unified conditions where people can come together and work together and talk together. Maybe disagree, but in a polite way, in a careful way. When we're speaking, when our concern is to speak the truth, we can easily have different ideas about what that is or how we can go about relating to that or pointing that out or bringing it out. And so there could be differences. But to the extent that we can all, approach and get each other and get into this exchange of thought and words and ideas, trusting that the other is equally concerned that you're getting their honest view, that this is how they feel, this is how they see this, the situation. Maybe recommending that I think this is what we must do or something on that order. Then we can maintain this harmony, this peacefulness. Suzuki Roshi, in his book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, right at the very beginning, in his prologue, he says, and I've talked on this before, but he says, people say that practicing Zen is difficult, but there is a misunderstanding as to why. It is not difficult because it is hard to sit in the cross-legged position or to attain enlightenment. It is difficult because it is hard to keep our mind pure and our practice pure in its fundamental sense. It's hard to keep the mind pure, he says. This is what is difficult. We're in discussions with others who might not agree with us. What does this mean to keep the mind pure? To keep it settled, to not lock onto your own position. It's already preset. These are the outcomes you want. This is how it is. This is how it's got to be. And then person on the other side, because you do see sides, is taking a different point of view and is just as much locked down in their position. This doesn't breed concord. This doesn't breed harmony. It doesn't bring us together in a way that can settle things down, where the mind can calm down, where we can then even begin to have a real conversation about the varying points of view, with no one of us being so attached to our view, taking it to be absolute truth, that this is how it is, and it must go this way, or we're all doomed. And I'm the only one here who knows this, and I can fix this, and you must follow, that's this sort of thing. Obviously, this can't bring about concord. This sows division and anger and hatred and fighting. And so what the Buddha is speaking of is, and what Suzuki Roshi here is speaking of, to make your mind pure, is to not hold to various views, and even slightly, let alone so tightly that you will allow them to, this very act that we have of grasping views and ideas and thinking we're so right and all of this, that we create mayhem and difficulty and pain and misery, injustice, all around us, hatred and anger. So this is something to be watchful of. And this is what Suzuki Roshi is saying. This is what is difficult. This also relates to a line that I've used quite a bit lately of Dogen's when he said, the reason we don't wake up is because we attach to views. We hold to our views, and as a result of this, we remain caught in confusion and delusion, and it's very difficult for us to come out of this. But now why? I wanted to ask this about what the Buddha said here in terms of right speech. It's so easy to say if this is a moral teaching that he's giving us. What we're familiar with here in the West in particular is that morality, at least there's plenty, enough of this, is not the only way to view this, but that morality comes from the dictates of someone above, whether it's God or some political leader or whatever, but what is right and good and all of this is coming from some one particular point. And there's some of us who can agree with that, and we start to amass our, a war chest or whatever to fight for that and defend it. And there's others who disagree and go the same way. We start to build up our arsenals and things to fight that. And so it's one thing to resist that and to point things out, perhaps, but it's another thing to get out there and to really go after the opposition in a way that's going to do damage and sow hatred, anger, and just perpetuate the same thing that we see around us all the time. And that now is becoming very starkly drawn. So what is this, again, with Suzuki, where he said, it is difficult to make our minds pure. And what is this exactly? And why should we do this? If this isn't about if we look at these words that we got here from the Buddha, that he's pointing out, this is right speech. And, but why should we follow this? This isn't like, as other kind of moral systems might go, this is the boss, the God, the whatever, the figurehead, who's telling us what to do. And we should just do it because it's being dictated by one who knows or by one who's omnipotent or just has a lot of physical power, armies and whatever. Doesn't really matter. If we think that this leads to any kind of a moral discipline or a moral understanding of the situation that we're in, or gives us any good advice as to how we might want to hold ourselves in the midst of all of this, when this is what's taking place around us, that isn't helpful at all. Why did the Buddha say what he said? Well, it is because, and the Buddha didn't expect, well, you just follow me because I'm the Buddha or I'm the great teacher or whatever. So you should follow what I say. He never taught that way. He said, don't take my word for it just because I said it or because other people, follow in that manner, or say that this is good and I should obey, the words of the Buddha or something like this. This isn't it at all. The Buddha's concern is that we wake up. Dogen reminds us this involves that we don't hold views. If we want to wake up to what is taking place here. So, but why? Why did the Buddha speak to us in this way? Well, he's talking about, how we can avoid, derision, avoid division and fighting and arguing, how we can avoid, creating a lot of hatred and anger and storminess. Talks about avoiding that. But then he also talks about, that we make the mind harmonious. We settle it down. And in, the meditation that we do here in Soto Zen practice anyway, is ultimately we can find this, or it finds us, this practice of shikantaza. Well, that word is a Japanese word, shikantaza, 4 syllables. And that first one, shi, is translated into English, directly into English, as tranquility. If we're practicing this meditation correctly, if we're actually practicing with shikantaza, we're practicing as shikantaza. If we practice in this way, the mind is tranquil. That's the first syllable. The second one, kan, is awareness. Tranquil awareness. Ta, perfectly done. Last one is just reference to sitting. But it's tranquility and awareness brought together in the mind. And so we settle down. So this is we have to have a reason. This is the reason for settling the mind. It's not because the Buddha said so. It has nothing to do with the Buddha's authority or anything. This is just one person who's pointing something out to us. And Dogen and others, they're just pointing out something to us, letting us know that the reason we don't wake up, we hold to our views, which will keep us divided and separated and coming up against other views and things like this that can easily arouse hostility in us and anger and resentment and all of that. This is not to keep the mind tranquil, settled. And this is the basis of morality in Buddhist teaching. It is not some law coming down from on high or from some strong man or something like this that's going to tell us, how we must behave. It is not coming from some God just solely because, that's it. That's the final authority. And you just have to do this. The Buddha never taught in this way. He's always invited people to question him and to test out what it is he's pointing out. See for yourself. Because this is how we find, the truth, reality. But this is how we can find a foundation for morality, for moral and correct and upright behavior. It is through doing this and being concerned with making the mind tranquil, settled, so it can be fully aware without gripping views, fully aware of things in totality, which is their true nature. And so it isn't, if we can actually achieve this and come to this, where we're not holding to, weighing things out, this is better than that, and all that stuff. We can finally learn to at least taste what it is that's free of that. Maybe we don't stay there. We can't easily stay there for too long before we're caught up with things again. But once we taste that, you'll know what that is, and you can learn to come back to that and come back to that again and again. And gradually it'll become more easy. It'll become more frequent. It'll be less intense, the kind of divided stuff that we otherwise get caught up with. So this is the basis of morality in Buddhism. It's not through laws and dictates and that sort of thing. We have the precepts, and the precepts, sometimes they're called, we just recited the precepts a few days ago, last week. And we have included in them, there's 16 precepts, but included in there, and those, we have the 10 grave precepts, which I've seen at times. They're called like the Buddhist 10 commandments. Well, they're not commandments. Nobody is commanding you. As I said, this is not, that's a decrepit moral system. It's weak, it's prone to just fall apart, can be argued with up and down and totally shredded. There's no foundation to morality based on something like that you point to some authority or whatever, or even rely on, my own authority when it's coming out of my own leanings of mine, my concern for myself in a very egoistic way. Now, it comes out of learning, as Suzuki Roshi said, what is difficult, and that is to settle the mind, to quiet the mind, to purify your own mind. Again, this takes us back to the Buddha, 183rd verse of the Dhammapada, which I've given you many times, where he says, to do what is wholesome, to avoid what is unwholesome, to do wholesome, what is of the whole, not the divided parts set one against another, but out of the whole, and just seeing the whole, which will be very peaceful and settled. And that's how you can kind of recognize that you're getting in its vicinity here. Well, you already are in it, but it's so you can see it at any time. But to do what is wholesome, to avoid what is unwholesome. But the third statement then is purify your own mind. And that is to learn to, and this is to make it tranquil, to settle it down. It is not through gripping views or holding to views. It is just simply seeing what is taking place right now, not just in the world out there around you, but in your own heart and mind. To start to recognize what this is, this gripping thing that we have to do. Even when our ideas is, well, I want to do something good. I want to help people. I want to do right practice and get out there and help those others. Well, be very careful here now, because you're acting out of an idea that you have, as opposed to just seeing what is taking place in the world. And through just seeing, we can see what is disharmonious and we can see what is harmonious. As long as we ourselves aren't holding to a view and insisting, well, it's got to go like this, or it's got to go like that. It doesn't have to go any one particular way at all to be harmonious, or for that matter, to be disharmonious. But this does involve that we learn to recognize when the mind is not tranquil, it is not settled, and therefore just that alone tells us that we have a held view of some sort, that we're not seeing things in totality. We're not seeing things in an impartial way. We are insisting, and we're caught up with some particular outcome, some particular benefit or advantage to one or another. Maybe not even necessarily myself, but to my friend over here. And that right there is a clue that it's one thing to get such an idea. It's another thing if you now act out of it, because immediately that takes us into confusion. And to act out of this is delusion. It is the complete opposite way of what the enlightened say. By the way, that little phrase too of the Buddha in the Dhammapada that I gave you, to do what is wholesome, to avoid what is unwholesome, to purify your own mind. Then the remainder of that verse is, the Buddha said, this is the teaching of the awakened. This is it in a nutshell. There it is right there. To do what is wholesome, to see what is wholesome. You don't need to research this or ask questions about it. Just watch your own heart and mind as you walk through the world. To do what is wholesome, to avoid what is unwholesome. You can feel this right away when the mind is leaning. It's got to go this way. Whatever it might be. Even in regards to awakening, you want to wake up or something. So you're going to try to do things that bring that about. That won't work. It just simply will not work. You don't need to concern yourself with things like that. Just watch your mind. And, so do what is wholesome, avoid what is unwholesome, purify your own mind. And that is it. This is what the awakened teach. That's it in its heart. That's it in its totality. And this also is the foundation a true foundation, which doesn't really require a foundation, but this is the foundation of morality right there, a morality that actually works. It avoids the kind of the pitfalls that we associate with morality when it's done with dictates and finger pointing and thou shalt nots, where it becomes kind of stinky and putrid and we don't like it. We don't want to go near it. Yeah, it's because we sense this isn't right. This is no, this other way that the Buddha points out, and I've tried to indicate this morning, is such a refreshing change from all of that. Totally refreshing. And it avoids all those kinds of pitfalls, and yet it also points to, well, the way that we can live. That's why too, like in the precepts, when we just had the precept recitation, and used to be, maybe we're getting back onto this now here at Dharma Field, but about every 7 weeks we would recite the precepts. And usually it doesn't amount to much more than, for those of you who might have tuned in last Monday when we did this, doesn't amount to much more than we just simply recite them. And then we're done. But there's an opportunity then to ask about the precepts as well. And sometimes there might be a little discussion. But it is very good to come back to this. In fact, I want to say this is very good. It's almost as if I could say, this is the most important thing. This fits right there with what Dogen said when he said, the reason you don't wake up. And if that's a concern to you, if you want to wake up, you want to know this, what is this enlightenment? What is this? If you, in your heart, you feel that there's something to this, and I want to know what this is, well, here is the thing you need to do. Well, I don't know, need to do. It's not an absolute here, but it's very helpful for you to bring yourself back to these kinds of reminders every now and then. And the recitation of the precepts are very helpful for that. And so I highly recommend it. And yet this particular activity that we do, it's always been this way, not only since we've started Dharma Field, but all through all of my experience in Zen practice, going all the way back to the early days with Katagiri Roshi. These are the areas where the students are less interested in taking up this concern. This concern of look at how you're living your life and look at the mind that you have as you go on about your daily business with this activity or that activity, this bit of speech or that kind of speech, or as you're hearing the speech being thrown about. This is absolutely vital. If your interest is in waking up, this is vital. What is not vital is to intellectually pursue this, where you have the question, but this is where people tend to go. So I'm forming these questions about this. And so then do you mean this? And do you mean that? And these things are okay up to a point. But just realize that you're not going to understand this. The awakening itself isn't going to come through some arrangement of words or thoughts or ideas that you might come up with. That is not it at all. Take this to heart. Realize what you're doing. Watch your own mind. Purify your own mind. That's with you noticing what you're doing and noticing your heart in the process of all of this. Don't scold yourself or pity yourself or get angry with yourself or anybody else for that matter. Just see what is going on with you in your heart and your mind. And it's not a matter of blaming and shaming. It's just simply, just being pointed out. You're not a sinner. You're not a bad person. Can't really say you're a good person. And that's true of all of us, me too. It's just, here we are, moment by moment. Let's see if we can act out of awakeness. Let's see if we can recognize when we're suddenly just off, spinning away with some deep concern of the moment. even in this deep political age around us. I'm also not saying, I hope you don't misunderstand, because we are in this political age and there will be an election, or at least I hope there will be an election coming up in a couple of months. I'm not saying to sit on your hands and don't do anything or don't vote, or I'm not saying anything like that at all. Far from it. I'm saying make your mind clear, make it settled, make it calm. And then if you happen to engage in a conversation with somebody where you're exchanging political views, keep settled, keep calm. Open yourself up to what they're saying, what they're thinking, what their view is. If you want to do anything at all to bring about harmony and concord rather than discord, this is vital. And keep your mind, as best you can, keep it settled. Again, this is not an easy thing to do, as Suzuki Roshi says, to keep the mind pure. You can easily get caught on a point that you're, kind of hooked on or you're insistent about or whatever. And there we go. And you don't need to, we can finally learn to, you don't need to go that far. That is not helpful. What is helpful is that we wake up and we bring ourselves back to this and we learn just what that is. That's not an easy thing to do, but this is what the awakened teach, as the Buddha said. Well, I've talking almost 40 minutes, it looks like, so maybe I should pause at this point. The talk I was going to talk about, I'll just save it for another time. It does kind of relate to right speech, so I have to give a little tiny mini right speech talk right before I give the talk I was going to give. That's what I was going to do today, but the right speech part looks like it ended up kind of filling the hour. So any questions about anything I said this morning? Yeah, Patrick.
Yeah, Steve, I was curious which, the book you were reading out of in the very beginning of the talk.
What the Buddha said about right speech?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Buddhism Plain and Simple. I happen to have this volume, which probably is familiar to a lot of you. I have to hold it right in front of me so it doesn't disappear. But it's anyway, but it has the same pagination as the basic one, the hardcover one, which is what we sell through Dharma Field if you get your books that way. And it's on page 77. It's the opening page of chapter 7 on morality. And it's a block quote here, a fairly long quote by the Buddha.
Okay. And I do have maybe a meteor question for you. Thanks for that. Something, and I know it's asking you about specifics is not always the best way to go about it. But sometimes I find myself at work or in social situations where you have a friend or somebody who is looking to build concord by gossiping about something else, or hey, what do you think about, isn't that guy a jerk, or that kind of thing. And yeah. I find myself in this situation where if I don't agree, I upset the person I'm with, and so I tend to kind of sheepishly say I don't know and leave it at that. And I don't know if you could speak to that, or
Well, that's not bad if you don't have anything that you can say at that point. Yeah, you don't know. And yeah, there's not, see, it isn't that we're now being called on to straighten that person out or anything of that sort, but you can learn to avoid, and there's different ways to do it. And I certainly haven't polished these ways myself yet, even though I've known this for a long time, and I still will get caught. So this isn't easy to do, as Suzuki Roshi said, but it's just a matter of observing that, and to the extent that you can, don't get yourself embroiled in such speech if you can. It's just simply not helpful. And that's about it. Over time, this might come easier to you. I don't know that it'll ever be perfected. I've given up on that idea. I don't know if anybody could perfect this, but we can move in this direction. And to the extent we can learn to keep our own mind settled, tranquil, in each moment, not that you can do that perfectly, because I can't, and I've been at it over 50 years, that's not really the point, but we can move in that direction. And with a more settled mind, it becomes more, it's easier to identify if there is anything that can be said, maybe you can say it. But very often, as I remember Kagure Roshi saying, very often there's nothing you can say, no particular thing that you can do. But on the other hand, just doing that alone, just not contributing to the speech, goes a long way. And we have one outstanding member in our Sangha here. I really shouldn't do this, but it's Norm. He does this better than anybody I've known, and I've known him over 40 years now. And he's if anybody has mastered this, it's Norm. But even he would say that he hasn't. But he's gone a long way. But he just won't pick those strands up that are going to be divisive and cause pain and difficulty. So I would say that there's someone you can look to, and if you need kind of but Norm's, I put him on the spot. I see him on my screen here. He's sitting over there, and maybe I hope he doesn't chew me out later. I got a copy of my book here for you, Norm, so maybe that'll keep him from jumping on me. I don't know, but because that isn't good either, what I just did in a way. But there are examples of that. But I would say of people that I've known in my life, Norm is exemplary of that. And I know him pretty well, and I've known him for a long time. But I think you all know that, at least those of you who've actually met Norm, you can kind of tell that about him, like right away. But again, that's, we're moving toward perfection there, perhaps. He won't agree, but we're moving toward that perhaps. But that's all you need to do. And don't ever start comparing yourself or feeling like, well, I can't be that way or whatever. It's not necessary to do that. Just basically, it's helpful if you can just get yourself out of the picture altogether. And in that way, you can allow your mind to be shaped by the whole rather than through any intentional action on your part or on anyone else's for that matter. So I don't know, does that help, Pat?
Yeah. And I just want to say, just not like you, not to call anybody out, but I do in the way that you and Norm and even other Sangha members respond to things and act out their lives. I feel supported by the teachers and the Sangha and how to live, how to. So I want to thank you and the Sangha for those reminders sometimes.
Yeah. And I'm grateful to everyone here too, as well.
So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Let's see, Bill.
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
Thank you for
the. Oh, here we are. Okay. Yes, I was trying to spot you on my screen here.
Thank you for your talk. I found it deeply penetrating this morning. And there are two things that have come up. One is, I wonder if you could supply some kind of framework of how to engage with the word wholesome. And the other one is, initially it came up when you were starting to talk about the current social situation we find ourselves in. And if you have any thoughts on the relationship between fear and anger. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Bill. Good questions. Well, the first one there about how did you put it, with how we can engage the wholesome or something of that sort.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry about that. You're already engaged, so to speak. That is always the situation that we're in, is totality, is the wholesome. It's not an object. It is not something to relate to. It is only something, if we can just kind of keep it in mind, in the backdrop of our mind. And basically what that is, and I talk about this in Buddhism Plain and Simple, is just simply, I use this term just to watch if your mind is leaning.
Yeah.
This is what you can spot.
Yeah.
You can't spot the whole, but you can tell if your mind is leaning toward this, away from that, and then pretty soon we begin to act toward that and away from this, and that's the thing we need to watch for.
Okay.
As for then the wholesome, if we just can start to learn to avoid that, just of its own, the mind straightens up. We move toward what is wholesome, and we don't get caught up so much in what is not wholesome or fractured and divided. So that, yeah. So, and now your second question, I thought I would retain these, but as an old duffer, I'm starting to learn. I got to learn to start taking notes here.
Yeah, I wrote them down.
Okay.
I wouldn't remember the relationship between fear and anger.
Oh, yes. Well, these are basically one and the same, fear and anger. And what's taking place in the mind at this point, and this would be the fractured mind. These will not appear in the whole mind, the mind of wholesomeness, because there isn't one thing set off against another. But once something is set off against another, then all of a sudden, here I am too. The self is also appearing at that point. And then the fear and the anger, these are things that we feel aversion to. We don't want them. We don't want to be frightened. We don't, well, whether or not we want, sometimes we can get so angry, we actually start to develop our anger and start to enjoy it or something. But really what we want is that tranquil mind, the settled mind. So we just learn to observe these things. But there's the three poisons of the mind. There's greed, then there's anger, and then we say self-delusion. So it's with delusion. When we are deluded about the self, we don't recognize that this strong sense of ego or self that appears now in this moment is appearing there, because we're also seeing things outside of me, things that I want or things that I detest. All of these things are beginning to appear. As we get thrust together with those things that we don't want, now anger can come up, or fear, depending on what that is. But that's that sense of aversion, and both of those are the same in that regard, in the way that they affect the mind and all that, the leanings of mind. And so they're kind of the same in that way. But the one, of course, is for fearing something, well, because of fear, it's threatening myself here in some way, or something that I'm attached to, a loved one or something of this sort. And then the anger is, of course, the frustration that we're not getting what we want here. We're not successfully destroying that thing that we hate, or we can't get away from that thing that we hate. So the anger, that comes up with it. But these things are all very much tightly wrapped up with each other. Now, there was a third point too, I think. Did I answer that for you, Bill?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, you didn't have another point, I guess. I thought there was. Well, maybe I covered it.
No, I had only two. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Bill. Claudia.
Hello, Steve. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm very honored to be speaking with you. I've read your books and I consider you a great master. I wondered if you could clarify with me what truth is as opposed to what we think truth is.
Yeah, well, truth, we're talking about truth with a capital T. This would be, this is reality. This is mind. This is wholeness. This is totality. It's not an object. It is what is experienced all the time. And then there are what we normally think of as truth. These would be like relative truths. And if I was writing, I would capitalize that first one that I mentioned, and but the relative truth, I would just type it out in lowercase. But these are truths relating to about the facts and to things that we can weigh out and identify and name and things of this sort. They also belong to this world where it appears that we have things that come and go. And so truth in this regard is just simply, things that are according with facts. Like, for example, right now, as I sit here, probably for you too, I guess, I'm looking at a computer screen, and I would imagine you are as well. And so we could say, well, this is the truth. I'm looking at a computer. It's right in front of me. I can touch it. And that's factually true. That's a relative truth. But ultimately, truth isn't of this nature. Truth is of wholeness and totality, and we can't really get hold of that, but we can see it. We can realize that nature is the nature of everything that is taking place here with us. And so that's if there is a distinction to be made, it's along those lines. Ultimately, though, these are not two truths. These are not separate. It's sort of like we could say that the relative truths are kind of like the manifestation of absolute truth or ultimate truth. It appears to manifest as this and that. And then these things will have their relationships in various ways that can come and go and change and even appear kind of ambiguous and things like this, where we can start to argue depending on what our point of view is and all that sort of thing. But if we realize that the true nature, the ultimate nature of what is taking place here is not really like that, then we can learn to calm down a bit. There's that tranquility. We can more easily find that aspect of mind, the Shi and Shikantaza. So I don't know, did that help you, Claudia?
Yeah, so truth is the true nature, the Buddha nature.
Yes, truth with a capital T, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it looks like that might be it. So my book, I lost it. Oh, here it is. Plug once again for my book, just a reminder. And you can go to that website, MTS. That Jose made that. I see him on my screen here now. He made that website. It's a beautiful website. I'm very happy with it. And I think you'll find it easy to navigate and all of that. So I would encourage you to check it out. I'm not used to plugging my books in. Well, I'm not used to doing anything this way. But anyway, I always feel a little funny about it when publishers or something want me to go on a book tour. Given the COVID situation, I can avoid that now. So, because I really, I'm not really a salesman type or whatever, but I know that a number of you have said that you're really interested or waiting for the book to come out. Just want to let you know that it's probably going to be just around the corner, probably a matter of a few days. I don't know that for sure. I haven't contacted the publisher yet. I just found a big box on my porch, so I know the books are there. So anyway, but thank you all. It was good to talk with you this morning.